it's always good to review it every year, okay? If you remember, last Sunday was Palm Sunday, and I bet in your Sunday school classes you talked about Jesus coming to Jerusalem. And I saw pictures online. I was in Atlanta taking care of grandchildren. I saw pictures online of a lot of you waving palm branches and walking into the sanctuary Sunday morning. How many got to do that last week?
There's a bunch of them.
Wonderful. And that's how this story starts. Jesus had spent 3 years with his disciples, and he was teaching them all about why he came to earth, why he was here to help and save everybody. But he said, now it is time for us to go to Jerusalem. And they were not happy about that, because they knew that the religious people in Jerusalem, they wanted to hurt him, and they begged him not to go. But he knew that he and God had a plan. So they came to Jerusalem, and that's when he rode into town on a donkey, and all the people cheered Hosanna, and they waved palm branches, and they laid their cloaks on the ground, and they were cheering for him as a king. Well, as the week went on, the leaders at the synagogue, which is the Jewish church, got madder and madder because he was healing people. He had told them all these wonderful stories, that did all these miracles. They were not excited about it. By the way, my name is Mary, and I followed Jesus after he made me well. I had been sick for a long time with evil things inside of me, and he made them all go away. And once he did that, then I followed him. And so I spent the rest of my time with he and the disciples. And so we came to Jerusalem. And during that week, Jesus threw over the table at the temple because they were making all this money cheating the people. And he said, this is God's house. You're not allowed to behave that way. And so he listened carefully to that and did exactly, the followers did what he asked, and they were so pleased. But not the religious leaders. They were mad that he was saying that he was there to save all the people from their sins. Okay? Well, then we get to Thursday. And on Thursday, he sent his disciples to a special place to set up for a dinner in what's called the upper room. And so they went upstairs in this house to the upper room. And if you were here at church Thursday night, they did a story and a play about that night when Jesus shared a meal. He gave out bread and wine to his disciples. And he told them that after he was gone, every time that they were together sharing a meal, they were to remember him. So when they would eat the bread or drink the wine, they would say, oh, I remember when we got to do that with Jesus. It was such a special time. So that is how they spent Thursday. And then at the end of the meal, Jesus said something very sad and scary. He said, one of you is going to betray me. The disciples looked so surprised, and they said, Lord, we would never, ever betray you. But what they didn't know is one had already gone and gotten money from the Jewish leaders of the church to be able to tell them where Jesus was going to be so they could capture him. And they could take him away to punish him for claiming to be the Son of God. Do you know which of the disciples was the bad one? Unfortunately, it was Judas. And as soon as Judas did what he was told to do, then he wished he hadn't done it. And so sometimes we make mistakes, and then we wish we hadn't. We say, oh, I knew better. I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that. And so this was a chance for him to do the right thing, but first he did the wrong thing. And so they finished their special meal together, and they went out to the garden to pray. Because praying with Jesus is very important. So they went out to the garden, and they were praying, and Jesus was talking to God his Father and saying, this is going to be really hard to do, but I promise I will do what you've asked me to do. And while they're in the dark and they're praying, who comes along but Judas? And Judas is bringing all these guards with him. And they've got swords. And he goes over and he says, the man that I go and kiss on the cheek, that is the man you're looking for. So he walks right up to Jesus and kisses him on the cheek. And the guards run in to arrest him. Well, you know, Peter was one of his disciples. right? And Peter had a temper. He got mad all the time. And so he says, I am going to save the Lord. And he chopped off the ear of one of the guard servants. And Jesus looked at him and said, Peter, this is not part of the plan. We're not going to hurt anybody. And so Jesus touched the servant's ear, and miraculously, his ear was completely healed. And the guards are looking like, how could this man heal that ear when all this blood was coming and everything? It was terrible. But he was perfectly fine. And then they said, you're coming with us. And they grabbed Jesus and tied him up and took him away. And the disciples were so frightened because they kept thinking, what if they come back and arrest us? What if they take us and throw us in jail? So they ran away to hide. And they just knew that they needed to stay hidden somewhere until this terrible thing was over. Well, what they didn't know was while Jesus was gone and held captive, he was beaten, he was whipped, they made a crown out of thorns because he said he was a king. He really was a king from heaven. And they put the crown on his head and it made him really bad. And they treated him terribly bad. And then he had to go before all the leaders, the king and the governor and all these people, and they kept saying, why are they treating you like this? And he didn't answer anybody. And Pontius Pilate was the man in charge of the government there. And he didn't want to hurt Jesus. So he said, I will give you an Easter present. They didn't call it Easter then. But in honor of the Sabbath, Passover time, I will set free one prisoner. And he thought sure that people would say, give us Jesus, free him. Instead, they said, give us Barabbas. And he was a crook. He was a very evil man and had done bad things. It was good he was in jail. He was supposed to be. So they kept Jesus and freed Barabbas. And then they took Jesus the next morning and said, coming with us, the crime for what you have done is that you have to be crucified. And so they took him. He tried to drag his cross. He was so tired and weak that the guards got somebody else to carry the cross for him. He went up onto the top of the hill, and they attached him to the cross and waited for him to die. And the people were so upset. By the time this happened, and Jesus was on the hill, I heard about this. And so did Jesus' mother, Mary. And so did some of the other women who had taken care of him. And his one disciple, John. He heard what happened. And we all rushed up the hill, stood at the foot of the cross, crying and wishing that God would reach down and just pick Jesus up right off of the cross and save him. But that wasn't part of the plan. Jesus hadn't made any mistakes. He had not committed any sins or crimes. He was on the cross for us. He offered to die in place of all the people who had done bad things. And so he stayed on the cross until the middle of the day, and we stood at the foot of the cross and prayed and cried and just wished he could be saved, which he could have. But if he did, then we couldn't be saved. He did it for us. And he told John, John, this is my mother. I want you to take care of her as though she's your mother. And he talked to the people and said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They've made a mistake. But this is our plan. And I will accept the punishment in their place. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus died. He said, it is finished. And he gave up his spirit and sent him home to be with God. Well, as soon as that happened, there was an earthquake. And the ground broke apart. And there was a thunderstorm. And lightning everywhere. And then it was pouring down rain. And it was just an awful, stormy time in the middle of a sunny day. And the people are going, what is going on? And down in the temple, the priests are down there. And the curtain that divided the temple is torn in half by nobody. Nobody's there. And it gets ripped in half. And all of this was God mourning the loss of his son who gave his life for them. The disciples had run away to heaven. Mary and me and the other ladies, we went away. Luckily, one of the people, one of the men that worked in the temple, his name was, he had a tomb, and he went to Pilate, and he said, please let me take the body of Jesus and put it in the tomb that belongs to my family. So they did that, and then they sealed the tomb up with a stone, and they made it so nobody could get in because there were guards put in front of it. But Joseph of Arimathea, who was the man that owned the tomb, he said, "We'll come back on Sunday morning," because it was the Sabbath. "We'll come back on Sunday and we'll pour the spices on Jesus to celebrate